Welcome to the Everyday Citizens Tactical Podcast, Episode 8, Conventional Forces and Civilian Takeaways. As always, my name is Jeremy and I will be your host. In this episode, I am joined by the Nickest of Nicks, who is a Marine Corps infantryman gone Army. Here, we're going to discuss a wide range of topics over conventional military forces, as well as some of the things civilians can take away to make more efficient prepper and community-based groups. For those that have not heard yet, as of the posting of this video, which is August 15th, we have been deleted off Instagram and Facebook once again. There was no warning prior to this happening, nor reason provided afterwards. But you can expect us to have our social media recreated and back up by the end of this week. With that out of the way, let's get started.
Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours. Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours.
All right, Nick, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
So you want to go ahead and give everybody a little bit of a introduction to yourself. You know, you're a rather large account, but you know, if anybody that may not have seen your account before.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm that large, but
you're 5 digits. That's getting up there.
let me see. I was in the Marines for 10 years. 2007, 2017. I was an 0311. Did 4 deployments there. And then as soon as I got out of the Marines, I immediately went to an Army recruiter and started the process of going to the Army. So in doing that, did all the paperwork, had to go through MEPS all over again, do all that. And 1 week after my contract with the Marine Corps officially ended, I went back to MEPS, shipped off to Fort Benning to do my Cav Scout training, and been in the Army ever since.
Nice. So let's see, that probably puts you probably close to almost 15 years now at this point then.
Yeah, I just hit 15 years in June.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I know we're definitely going to focus on a lot more of like the conventional side of topics tonight, which I think a lot of people have questions about, specifically those that have never served, but even those that have been in the military, people that weren't ground side, and then even on the ground side specifically in your more infantry style fields, you know, don't understand a lot of the kind of big picture stuff that goes into that. So we're going to dive into some of those topics tonight. I guess we can kind of start with, you know, what are some big takeaways from conventional forces that both veterans that are out now and civilians who have never served should kind of take note of?
How much planning that really goes into an operation, whether it be something as simple as, you know, like a squad ambush to a company size raid. There is a lot of planning and replanning, rethinking, and, you know, possibilities that you think of that change things on the fly, that go into it just to make like just that one mission go as smooth as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people kind of get not necessarily narrow-minded, but they kind of put the walls up, the blinders up, because they only think of their small group, or they think of like that guerrilla force, that group of 5 guys, when, you know, planning anything for 5 guys, even just a basic training event, is so much easier, so much more simple than, you know, doing even like a platoon size training event.
Yeah, training is a great example of understanding how much planning and logistics that goes into it. So like right now, I am an instructor, and being, you know, for me, I show up, I already know what class I'm going to teach, and I do it, and then I essentially go home. But, and with that, I also see like what goes into all that, because it's, you know, whatever class that I'm going to teach, that class was planned maybe 3 months, 4 months before it even happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be anything from like a live fire range where we're teaching these guys, okay, this is how you use a 50 cal and a 240. All that planning just to get that one range day took months ahead of time just to get to that day. So, something that we do quite frequently, it still takes months to prepare for that one time that we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, even in training, like people can take away is like, there's a lot that goes into it.
And one of the big benefits of being that conventional force is that you have years and years worth of doctrine and standardized templates to help you plan training. Whereas, those on the civilian side, or even if you think like small scale, like first responder size, in like your suburban and rural areas, there's not necessarily that history of documentation and, information that's already put forth for you to continue to reference as you plan things over and over and over again. Because I know, like, for us, for my local crew, we're going to a force-on-force facility later this month, and I started planning that training back at the end of May, because there's so much logistics that goes into it. But then you also have to think about, what are we actually training on? What are the subcategories of, those big picture categories are we going to train on? So it's definitely a lot.
Right. Another factor I would say is like, so you're firefighter or police?
Yeah, I'm a fireman.
Right. So, your department, your city or county, they have their own ways of going through the chain to get like, hey, we want to do this training. Okay, you have your set way of doing it, and then the Army has its set way. Mm-hmm. And like the Army side is pretty it's a pretty long chain of like stuff people you gotta go through just to get like, hey, I need 100 rounds for this one day, whereas, civilian side, it could be better or it can even be worse, like, cause I don't have a background in, the civilian side of that, but I can only imagine like, your department is set on a budget and then they want to go train, but yet, is it going to take them over budget? And if it does, like, what's the process to even request to go above budget and get more funding for that?
Mm-hmm. It's very similar to how I remember things in the Marine Corps. There's the planning stage, there's the ask permission stage, there's the logistics stage, so on and so forth. I mean, even just as much as, using an abandoned building in our district to perform some sort of training that would benefit us is weeks, if not months, worth of planning for asking such and such department if we can do this, and then planning the training and then scheduling the training and all that. So definitely smaller scale, but it's kind of easy for me to pick up on just coming from big military and seeing how things were done with that. You kind of started to talk about that, kind of all of the steps in the large scale picture that goes into that, even with something like the Army. So do you kind of want to hit on how that kind of works? What's the command structure? What's the unit structure kind of look like for your general area that you're in on a normal basis, without giving away any OPSEC related details?
Okay. So when I was in my last unit that I just came from, so I was a squad leader, and essentially I would have to do what we call a concept operations, and make a PowerPoint. It's like, this is the training I want to do, and I gotta have like, make sure I gotta make it look pretty too, because there's like a format they want you to follow too. But it's like, the 5 W's, the like what's the goal, like all that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Probably the best way to think of it is like, just it's kind of like a workout. You know what you want to do, but if you really want to make it good, you got to like really plan it out methodically and focus on what you're trying to train for that day or that week, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like that. And then I have to present it to my platoon sergeant, my platoon commander. They look over it, tell me what to fix, redo it. Once it's good enough for them, it just goes up to, company commander, XO. And then it goes up again. And then once it's, gone all the way up to basically the squadron commander, to prove it. Now it's like, okay, let's get these dates, let's get these ranges, stuff like that. Kind of make have, okay, we need this range on this day. We need X amount of ammo. If we're going to shoot ammo, we're going to need this equipment or whatever, stuff like that. So it can be a process.
Mm-hmm. And there's definitely probably pros and cons to having such a long process and a set, basically chain.
There is. I mean, it prevents, in the good side, it makes sure that, like, the people who are supposed to, like, know that, hey, this request form is going to be sent to, is coming towards you. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the executive officer is going to be CC'd in an email, and it's going to go to whatever civilians, that actually get the request form for the ammo. It's like, okay, cool. So the civilians have it, and the XO has it, and it's supposed to be like, hey, the XO should have that, so that way he knows, like, hey, he can go and check up on and see what's going on, because the executive officer side of stuff is, they're the ones basically doing all admin stuff and logistic stuff as well. Mm-hmm. So, and that's something, I guess,
big picture wise too, with something like that. If your company, say your alpha company, and you do a training, and that training comes to a conclusion, the good word spreads at the squad leader level, the platoon leader level, or even like the company leadership level. Alpha company, is bragging about how well the training went. Now Bravo company is like, hey, this was really good training. Let's plan something similar or exact same to ours and put this into our training rotation, and so on and so forth. So then you're constantly sharing good training amongst your forces.
Mm-hmm. And with that is, even if it's just in training, we're going to do the same process to get the logistics that we need. So for us as Cat Scouts, our big thing is vehicles. So I had to work in Humvees a lot, and everyone already knows, like, okay, Mondays we go to the motor pool, work on vehicles. If we're going to go out to the field, we already know, okay, Monday we go work on vehicles, dispatch them, make sure they're good to go. And if we're going to leave on a Wednesday, okay, when are we going to get fuel? That's one of our biggest questions. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we know as we need to do it, but it's when's our timeline?
Yeah. And I think that's definitely a big takeaway that people can make note of from the conventional side, is that even in your training, it should still look similar to the process of an operation in a sense.
Yes.
What does your prep work look like? What does your staging work look like? What is, getting to that training look like? Like if you're a civilian group and you're doing, a patrolling exercise with a squad size element, did you guys, meet up at the location and then, kind of bullshit in the parking lot for a couple minutes and then just randomly start walking? Or did you show up in your vehicles, properly take up 360, stage outside the vehicles, and then, establish your route, and then, go on and so forth? So there's definitely big takeaways with that on the conventional side.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you kind of started to talk about the prep work with that and, the planning stages. So, what are some of the big benefits in your eyes of notes as far as kind of capabilities and the resources and logistics of a conventional force that people should, kind of take note of and study on?
Okay, so a good example would be the post I made about not everyone's gonna be a trigger puller.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that?
That was a good post. I did. That was a good one.
Yeah. So they, like, if someone were to actually look at, okay, the Marine Corps, right? Mm-hmm. So how, the answer to this was like, what's the percent of Marines are actually infantry?
I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's less than 5%.
Okay, so it's gone down since I've been in. I think
at one point it was
like
close to 10%.
Yeah, it was 10% when I was in.
And then there was a bit of a drawdown.
Yeah.
Probably right around, actually, when you got out, like 2017. And then when we got the new Commandant in 2020, I think it was 2020 or 2019, he kind of like re-envisioned the infantry in a sense, or what his idea was, and they kind of started to build that back up.
Yeah, so I came from a 10% era, and that's why I said it might have changed. But like it's around 5. We'll say 5 just for number's sake.
Mm-hmm.
So 5% of the entire Marine Corps is infantry. That means 95% is all support for infantry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's whether it's, logistics, motor T, the air wing, bulk fuel, artillery. It's all support,
So for reference for everybody that's listening, there is 178,500 active duty Marines as of the 2022 fiscal year. So if we did 5% of that, that means there's just shy of 9,000 infantry Marines for the entire United States Marine Corps.
Yep. That's nothing.
That's literally absolutely nothing. Now, I think people get misled as far as history goes and the study of different wars and battles and whatnot, because even throughout history, a large scale of conflict, specifically we can look at like World War I to now, a large amount of conflict is not necessarily always revolved around infantrymen. In some conflicts, infantry was extremely big, Vietnam, World War II, but in a lot of other conflicts, especially in like the Middle East, a lot of your other ground side units you start to see in more combat style roles, whether that's just taking contact from different logistics convoys in hot zones,
right?
Or their EOD, whatever it may be.
Yeah, a really good, probably spicy one would be Jessica Lynch. Like her convoy, her unit, she was a logistics clerk. So she was in I think she was in a BSB, we call it, so it was a brigade support battalion. So it's a giant logistics battalion for her brigade.
Mm-hmm.
And they're, going through Nasiriyah, and at her point in the convoy, they get hit and separated, they got separated first, and then they get hit. So that's also something that, like, you may be wanting to help your community because, like, well, I'm a doctor, or, I can do this, whatever skill, that's enabling, but you're still at risk. You're not completely safe.
For sure. And infantry, if you look at the conventional side, the true purpose of an infantry, marine, soldier, whatever it may be, or the equivalents of such, is direct action all the time, pretty much no other question, except in some conflicts where they hold somewhat of like a security style role. Like your infantrymen aren't doing all of these other support style tasks if the conflict is heavy. Yeah, towards the end of the war in the Middle East, probably like post 2014, you see things start to draw down and you don't necessarily see the nitty gritty side of the infantry, but that is their sole job is taking souls, whereas everybody else, they have purposes, they have different jobs, they just happen to get roped into the conflict doing those specific tasks.
Right.
But for the listeners who weren't in the military that do know, all of your gunners on your security Humvees during like logistics convoys, or different types of security patrols for FOBs and all that, those aren't dedicated machine gunners sitting on the 240s and 50 cals. Those are your S3 guys or an S6 guy or whatever that went to a course prior to that deployment or prior to that large field op and got training on that and now serves secondarily in that role. They're not a dedicated machine gunner. They're not an infantryman.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there. But yeah, so I guess let's talk about logistics a little bit. Big picture military. If it wasn't for logistics, as much as people hate to say it, bullets don't fly without supply. That is a very true statement.
It is, but
it's so corny at the same time.
Yeah, well, because it's always said by like the corniest looking dude.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, dude, you never probably even shot your weapon before, and you're saying that. but
But yeah, so logistics. What are what are some key points of consideration just as far as setting up for a large scale operation? Say you're conducting an area assault at like a platoon size level. What are some big logistical factors that people should make note of, should consider, civilian side or military side?
Time.
Time is a big one.
I would say time. Not just time as in like what time are we going to execute this, or what time are they going to be here, but like how long is this going to take to get to us? If so like in the Marines we have a company gunny, right? Yeah, so the company gunny is the one that does all the logistics stuff for us normally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in the Army it's the first sergeant that does all that. We don't have a gunny.
Interesting.
So, but you have that guy that their job is to go get your stuff for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And okay, if they're gonna go get it for, say, resupply of ammo, food, water, chow, fuel, they got to go to X grid and get it and then come back. How long is that going to take? Because that means at any point in time you are now potentially going to fight with whatever logistics you have at that time, while you're waiting for the resupply to come to you.
And I think that's a big factor that a lot of people forget about, even the military side guys, because in this modern day of age, specifically like the big picture forces, the battalion size elements and bigger, is we kind of are spoiled by logistics in the past 20 years of warfare, where that wasn't always the same in previous conflicts, before we spent this long in the sandbox. Because we had the luxury of just dominating, specifically the sky, but even like roadways throughout the entire conflict.
Right.
Except for a few, mountain passes in Afghanistan and whatnot. I mean, we pretty much dominated logistics, where, as in other times, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, all these other places, logistics is not so easy. And I don't think people consider that a bunch. Even my military side guys, I feel like they forget about that a lot.
Yeah. I forgot I was gonna go with that. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I think about it from I think about it heavily from the ammo perspective. A lot of times, even when I was in the military, and we're talking about ammo loadouts, people think of what ammo they need for the actual conflict to come, the whole point of an operation, whether it's defensive or offensive, but they don't think of what do I need after that before I get more of my primary loadout.
Right.
People are like, oh, I've got my 7 mags plus 5 in my pack. That's good for the operation. Okay, what happens when you use all of your operation ammo and you have 12 hours till somebody brings you ammo?
Or
Definitely. Go ahead.
Or like you're a homesteader and you're fighting off people coming trying to take over. You may have a full loadout and you expend 5 mags. Okay, well, how long is it going to take you to replace those 5 mags? Not from your own stockpile that you have saved up, like, because you're going to have to pull from that stockpile.
For sure.
So, like, how long is it going to take you to replace those 5 mags to go back into reserve, essentially?
And I feel like that's a really hard aspect to think about.
It is, but it's...
I think it was Op 4 that was talking about it on his story, maybe. If he was talking about just how general picture conflict isn't going to be what everybody thinks it might be here in the U.S. Like it might have been him, it might have been you. I don't remember. Somebody was talking about how you can't rely on your homestead to be, this giant fortress that you're going to hold out the entire conflict or end of the world or whatever on. And I thought that was a really good point. However, it's really hard to like plan for that type of event. You know, as a civilian right now, you and your squad size element of dudes plus their families, we have pretty much no way of acquiring more ammunition. Even if you have a reloading station, once you run out of powder and primers and all that kind of stuff, you're out. You know, you don't have that type of infrastructure to provide for you. You know, if you have a really large garden and something goes wrong during harvest season in your garden, or you know whatever happens, where are you getting more supplies of that? Because again, you don't have the infrastructure for that.
Yep. That was something I mentioned that before a while ago, and you know the point I was trying to make was like, because I was getting at guys who think that, you know, oh, I got my team of guys and we're gonna go out and you know do small ambushes or stuff like that, and we're gonna, you know, battlefield pick up and resupply that way. Like, well, that in theory or in fantasy sounds great, but in reality that's not gonna get you far.
Yeah, it's a hard task in general.
Yeah, and it's like if you don't have a way to actually sustain yourself continuously, then your mindset and focus probably needs to shift. Because I know, because like one of the things is like, I think what a lot of us trying to do is like we're trying to eliminate the fantasy of people thinking they're gonna go out and just boogaloo.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the things, and that's why we talk about, you know, the logistics so much. It's like, you know, we're trying to pull people back away from the boogaloo mentality, and it's like it's not going to be, you know, as cool as you think it's going to be. It's going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, people find out real quick how much that stuff sucks just by doing actual training.
mm-hmm.
Like if you have either a veteran in your group that's motivated, or B, a civilian who's done quite an extensive, lengthy amount of research, and they do actual trainings that involve, you know, large-scale movements and realistic kit loadouts and all that kind of stuff, you start to realize, like, just getting to and from, you know, a staging area for some sort of operation is a lot of work within itself.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be so excited to, you know, conduct that ambush when you had to track 6 miles through the hollers because you can't use the main roads because you're not the dominant force in the area.
Yep.
And now you're trying to set up an ambush and hope you were too late because people got tired and you had to wait. Now you missed your window of opportunity. So now you're sitting at that point to wait for them to come back again tomorrow, and there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. That's also why I touch on like deliberate plannings too in my posts, because that's something like Reaper, he talks about, you know, like, you know, his niche, you know, is on the sniper and like a lot of fieldcraft stuff, you know, like all that good stuff. But the thing is, like, we trying to get people out of like the whole mindset, like, well, I'm just gonna go in this building and I'm just gonna snipe dudes from this far away. Like, well, it doesn't work like that.
That's not how it works at all.
It's like a sniper just doesn't go to a random spot and just hope he gets something, you know. It's there's a lot of deliberate planning. He actually knows he can smartly predict where his enemy is going to be because he knows his enemy, which goes into, you know, understanding things like their doctrine. So if there's like a invading force, like, you need to understand their doctrine, because that doctrine is going to tell you what they're going to do, essentially. You know, so like the Ukraine conflict is a big one. When it first started off, I was in my old unit, and we were all talking about it, watching the news and stuff. And the thing I noticed was, like, there's a lot of Bertams and BMPs destroyed. You know, it's like, okay, well, I know Bertam and BMPs are used for reconnaissance, especially the Bertam. And it's like, that tells me they're not using the reconnaissance assets right. They're getting destroyed. And the proof is in, like, oh, all these tanks are getting hit. Well, yeah, if your essentially your reconnaissance elements are just going into the city with the mindset, let's just see what we find, getting lit up. Now your tanks are coming in blind, and they're getting lit up. What do you think was going to happen?
And I think that brings on two important aspects that everybody forgets, regardless of whatever side of a conflict you find yourself on, whether you're civilian, military, whatever it is. It brings up two important points. Is that one, over the past 20 years of conflict in the Middle East, we have this perception of what warfare is supposed to look like, when in reality we have not fought a true conventional force, specifically one that's heavily supplied by outside forces like Ukraine is right now. Like if Ukraine hasn't been getting weapons for the past 6 months, that this war would not even still be existing.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically on like the shoulder-fired rocket side, and all that kind of stuff. Like those elements added to the small units, that has absolutely changed the front. They're still getting their butts kicked, in my opinion, but they're holding off better through those resources.
Mm-hmm.
So the next time the U.S. fights in a conventional war, everybody's in for a really rude awakening.
Yes.
The second part of that is I think we can look at the conflict in the Middle East to reference this, is that if you're, let's say you're an infantry company and you get on deck in your AO area, this is where you're spending the next 8 months of your deployments. A lot of times, specifically in the beginning, people got their butts kicked a lot for the first portion of their deployment, because it's so much different than your training, and you have to get to know your area because you're going to a place you've absolutely never been before. You've never actually fought an insurgency force. I remember a lot of stories from the early Iraq and Afghanistan vets talking about how like the first 4 months or so you're on deck, that you'd be lost in the sauce, and then you pick it up and everything, you start to make notes of everything, you're starting to operate a lot smoother, and then the next crew gets on deck and they screw it up, and then they start to pick things up, and it's kind of a constant battle of that.
Yep. That was something we had to learn how to work through too. So when we were getting ready for Afghanistan, we were always taught and trained to, like, okay, when you do your RIP, when you do your left seat, right seat with the people you're relieving, that's probably when you're going to get hit or not hit, because they're going to be watching you regardless. So they're going to hit you to see how you react, or they're not going to hit you because they're going to watch and see if you know what to do, because they're going to know that these are new people.
Yeah.
Once they actually study you, then they know how to hit you, and that's when you get messed up.
And that is kind of like a different element, I guess we could kind of hit on, that's less conventional, but kind of fits into this subject, is that you should always, specifically as a smaller force, you should always try to deceive the enemy on your true numbers or capabilities. Whether that's changing your uniforms, changing your patrol formations, whatever that may be. I know what we used to do on the embassy security side when we would do augmentations to embassies. We would change our camis every couple days, or different fire teams would wear different camis, or we'd wear civilian attire while the other teams wore camis. Today we'd go out in a security patrol of 4, and then the next day we'd go out in 2, and then we'd send 2 teams out, and we'd have 8 guys. And they're all in desert camis, but then a couple hours later someone would come out in woodland camis. So you really want to try to throw off your observers and other intelligence units that may be observing your forces, even if you're the smaller force.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of hard to do on the conventional side because you're so big picture, but if you're the smaller force, it is definitely in your best interest. You can't really deceive a company size element of soldiers or Marines, because it's very evident of what is there and what's going on.
Right.
But if you're a squad size guerrilla force, or you're a platoon size guerrilla force, it's possible to do that.
Right.
Which I guess as we talk about numbers, we can kind of talk about recruitment and retention. I kind of want to just hear your opinion, and I guess if you're willing to talk about it, of just how the recruitment and retention is going in the military right now, because I've been out for a few years now, so I'm not as in touch as I was before.
Well, recruitment really just going to be like any other kind of recruitment. At the end of the day, it's going to be about what's in it for them. I mean, that's really the big thing. If they're young and they just want to like see action and experience cool stuff, that can be something you can use to like, okay, maybe this isn't what we're looking for, or like, okay, he's eager, they're eager, maybe we can bring him in and train them up and then kind of like mature them a little bit, before we send them out, kind of things. But it's really going to come down to what's in it for them.
How do you feel on the, not necessarily the retention side, but the recruitment side? I've read, I think most of us have read that both like the Marine Corps and the Army are struggling right now as far as recruiting quotas go.
Yeah, it's definitely in the Army. So I can't give my opinions too much on that.
Yeah, because you're still active.
Yeah, but I can say this though, is the guys that have gotten out, that were my soldiers, what they told me is that it's because they see nothing out of it. There's no deployments going on, there's no war going on, they just feel like they're wasting their time and they don't even know why they joined in the first place.
And that's an unfortunate reality for a lot of younger guys, specifically probably since like 2015, when the Iraq and Afghanistan deployments really started to drop off.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily bad. I mean,
no, it's not necessarily bad. To have a meaningful military career, you don't have to be a door kicker your whole life.
No. And I told this to guys when I was in the Marines still, before I got out, was that even though there's nothing going on, that's your time to invest in yourself. Maybe in the Marine Corps, guys didn't see it so much because the way units send guys to schools, and that, and I know dudes trying to go to school is like, one of the hardest things, because there's always limited spots, and it's pretty much a competition of like who's going to go. Whereas in the Army, you want to go to school, you just tell your squad leader, and they do the paperwork to get you in. Make sure, if it's something that you need to be physically fit, make sure you're fit, and you go.
See, that's what's always confused me, is how there's that big of a difference between the Marine Corps and the Army as far as training possibilities for individuals. And it almost seems like when I was in the Marine Corps, it almost seems like some leadership would kind of like, not necessarily frown on you wanting to go to training, but they didn't see it as like, I'm trying to better this individual. They see it 100% as of, does him going to do this better my position and my perspective of the company? And I always think that was a really wrong perspective to have.
Yeah, I didn't see it that way, kind of. It felt like more of like if you wanted to go somewhere, you're inconveniencing them because now they got to do paperwork to get you there.
That was another big one, which
it really
frustrated me.
It really felt like it was like you're inconveniencing them. So, and then, we can go on probably for hours talking about like the messed up side of the Marine Corps too, of like favorites and the politics and stuff like that. But I mean, but yeah, I mean that's a factor too. And in the Army, I've only experienced one platoon sergeant trying to keep me away from school, and my buddy that was the other squad leader told me about it. So I messaged him. It's like, hey, I want to go to school, and thankfully my PL was in that group chat, and she got me in.
Nice.
So yeah, that was like, that's been my experience. Like, if you want to go to school, you can go. Like, you can really do anything you want in the Army until they tell you no.
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. I mean, unless it's like airborne, so that's a hard one sometimes. But
So, kind of transitioning from the conventional side, let's start talking about the modern civilian, and it doesn't have to be as far as here comes the war type,
yeah,
but just general knowledge, training, all that kind of stuff. How do you feel about the current shift in direction that the average, we'll even use the word tactical civilian, is kind of heading?
I think it's going in the right direction. There's always going to be stuff we need to work on to fix to better it, but the realization of basic infantry like skills to be applied is really refreshing, I think.
It seems like even if you go back to 2020, like right before COVID started, even right after, there was not this same, I would call it, movement or idea of the infantryman in a civilian. Like I think, like if I look back, like everything was dry fire videos, split times, slickster rigs, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I really don't know when or where it became, but I mean, for me, it was a little after the Mountain Recce video from Grand Thumb,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody was all about Recce this, Recce that, and I just got annoyed with it because it was like, that's not reconnaissance.
Mm-hmm.
Reconnaissance is not a rifle, it's not a piece of gear. And I just kind of, I guess, retaliated, and then I just somehow accidentally, my stuff just started getting shared.
Yeah, and that's kind of the good that comes with the bad, is that when there are trends that are misunderstood or seen in the wrong way, there's people that step in and hopefully either guide people back to where they need to be on that topic, or they start providing other information on those topics. I think I started doing like the Minuteman style posts, the educational ones that are like 10 slides, PowerPoint style. Pretty sure in August of 2021. I think it's when I started posting the first ones. But at that point, people were also already doing different educational style posts, which I like the change, the educational style posts. It kind of allows everybody to get creative, and hit on a lot of different topics,
Yeah,
and really pack information into posts.
and because there is so many ways of doing a set skill,
Mm-hmm.
especially like just basic infantry.
And you can ask an infantry marine and infantryman, an 11 Bravo from the Army, on how to do something, and sometimes you're going to get the same answer, and then sometimes you're going to get completely different answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really good thing to have, is the diversification of knowledge. So long as people are willing to accept, like, hey, there is more than one way to do things.
Right, and
I think people get narrow. I think people get narrowed in on that. Is that
they do. I see that a lot with my posts, people commenting, because you've seen, like, I like posting a lot of doctrine stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I do that is because I believe in order for a civilian to be an effective guerrilla or militiaman, they need to understand the how and why
Mm-hmm.
of how it actually works before they start, okay, how do I, tweak it? How do I make it mine? Or what can I do different that they won't expect, kind of? Because the doctrine is just overall, like, this is what you should want or strive for, but in the end, you figure out a way to do it.
And for as far as like the doctrine side goes, there's nothing that says this is what's in the doctrine, hence this is what I have to do. If you and your group of guys, are reading a doctrine from an infantry handbook on, patrolling. If you are informed on the topic and you're like, you know what, instead of doing it by the book this way, we're going to make this adjustment, and this is our doctrine. You know, that's fine. You're supposed to adapt to your environment, adapt to your mission set, adapt to your resources and capabilities. You know, I very much encourage people to create kind of documents, in a sense, you know, doctrine for your own group. Not only as like as a learning tool, but also as a reference tool later for if your squad size element of dudes that have been training for 2 years turns into the whole community is now involved, you know, whatever it is type thing, and you need to train a lot of different people. Now you have the doctrine on how you have decided to do things over the past years, to reference when you bring in new people.
Because the doctrine is essentially a standard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, hey, we're doing a squad ambush. Okay, like this is the standard, but you can execute it however you want.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you meet the standard, that's all we're looking for.
And with that being said, you know, don't go posting your SOPs and doctrines and everything on the internet and whatnot. Providing examples and making generic forms to share with other people or to inspire other people is one thing, but like, you know, don't put your specific SOPs, formats and styles and all that.
Yeah, I mean,
in play. Remember your OPSEC.
Yeah, meaning like, you know, this is how our challenge of pass is going to be. These are going to be our frequencies. These are going to be our near far recognition type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because the thing I was actually I'm working on right now is like, okay, so like battle drills, you know, so you have a react to a near and far ambush. Okay, so you know to return fire. If it's a far ambush, you're going to, you know, flank and close the gate, right? You know, so maneuver element's going to flank around and assault through the enemy ambush. So you already know that that's what they're going to do. So basically, if you're going to be engaging, you need to basically be planning like, how are we going to stop that counter ambush? You know,
that's a good point. If you start looking at, if you are fighting a conventional forces, can you study their open SOPs and doctrine?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point. That's always been in the back of my head, but I've never said it out loud like that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, like, and the simple answer is like, well, set up your ambush right. You know, that's why you have your assault force and your security and your support right,
mm-hmm.
and you have your flanks. So like, you stop that. Like, well, yes, but you gotta. That's why you have that. Is what I'm trying to get at. It's like, and that also reinforces of like, oh, that's why we do it this way. Like, yes.
So with that being said, what are some major areas of consideration for small units to focus on, in your opinion? They could be American civilians, it could be, you know, foreign fighters, it could be anything. Just the general small unit force that's fighting a larger or a conventional force.
What to focus on in their training?
Like, not necessarily. I guess there's two aspects to this. I guess it's your training, and then I guess it's also like your organizational setup or your operational planning or whatever that may be. Let's start with like the operation side, like just general operational considerations for the small unit.
Okay, so I talked to the guys at Ribier Tactical about this a little bit. As a leader, understanding your displacement criteria, mm-hmm. I would say.
Okay. Can you expand on that for those that don't understand that?
Yeah, so your displacement criteria is basically your conditions that you must meet that allow you to displace. So it can be anything from like, hey, once you eliminate 4 enemy and 2 trucks, or once you identify a piece of equipment or HVT, you're good to go. being a smaller force going against, a bigger conventional force potentially, that's what's going to help you to succeed. So if you only have, let's say 8 guys, and you're going against a platoon for some reason. You said
for some reason.
Yeah, you said bigger, so. But
that's true. Yeah, that's fairly realistic in the grand scheme of things.
So okay, if you got your 8 guys, all right, you're gonna plan it out. We're going to engage when they're in this spot, right? And we're going to engage this area of the formation. Everyone's going to mad minute, and then we're going to just get out of there. Mm-hmm. That could be your displacement criteria, So now it's essentially like you just mag dumped on a platoon, and 8 guys, so that's 30 times 8. I'm bad at math. 240. No.
I'll give you a second. Go ahead. You're in the right direction.
Yeah. So 200. Yeah.
240.
Yeah, 240. Oh, wow. So you just shot 240 rounds at pretty much a squad. Like if you're like one part of the platoon, so pretty much a squad. Mm-hmm. Maybe you hit all of them, maybe not, but you just did all that and left. They are going to be so confused, so overwhelmed, and by the time they realize what happened, they're going to have to go treat their guys that you wounded or killed, and then guys will be running around, and then once they get all that figured out, you're already gone. Uh-huh. And like you do that, like they're not going to want to fight against that.
And I think that's one thing that a lot of civilians forget about, and even sometimes the veteran community, is that every ambush is not a total destruction, objective.
Right.
Most of your ambushes are going to be centered around just being a pest, and really wearing down those enemy forces. Because, like you said, if your 8 guys are engaging, that first squad of that platoon that happens to be in the front of a convoy or a patrol or whatever, anything like that. Well, now that squad is significantly damaged, and they may or may not be able to replenish that squad immediately, and now you've taken little to no casualties.
Mm-hmm.
Now you come back a couple days later, and you do the same thing, Now they really start to take a hit. Now the playing field starts to level.
Yep.
It's not a win today, go home tomorrow type thing, as much as people may want to think that it is. The reality of that kind of stuff is it's long and drawn out, and it sucks.
Yeah.
And then, a big part of that is if you take 2 casualties to conduct that ambush, because, let's say that second squad was hot on their feet, started getting into an L-shaped real fast, you took 2 casualties on your far right side. Now you're down to 6. Was the ambush worth it in the method that you conducted it? What was the risk versus reward for that?
Yeah, it's like 2 guys at 8. That's 25%.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But yeah, so back to small unit capabilities. So yeah, definitely on that one. What would you say about? This is gonna be the popular part, because this is what's hot on the internet. Is what about weapons specifically? What kind of considerations, capabilities should small units focus on?
Oh man,
my opinion on it is that having good riflemen is just critical.
Yeah, but you're talking about like specific equipment?
We could talk about specific equipment or specific weapon platforms, or I guess I should say weapon systems that people could look into.
You're going to need something that is common in your area. So I don't have one right now, but I'm a believer having AK and an AR.
I've noticed a lot of the AR guys have started taking to AKs.
Yeah, I'm not like a super simp for them, for lack of better words, but like I know that like if potentially I might need one because, China gets froggy, and they come. It's like, well, looks like I'm gonna need the AK because I think they carry 760 by 39.
They do. I can't remember. They started to move towards.
It's not an AK though. I think it's like a Type 99 or something they call it.
Yeah, it's weird because the Chinese military is so big. Their gear and their weapons aren't necessarily perfectly standardized.
Yeah,
because their force is so big that they can't do that in a reasonable time frame. Every time they make an update or they transition to something.
But yeah, the point though is I would try to like get something that's common.
Mm-hmm.
So I have ARs, so that's what I have. But my plan is to eventually have AK because it's a pretty common weapon.
Mm-hmm. Even in America, it's a common weapon.
The ammo, I would say too. So my ARs are 5.56. I specifically make sure everything I buy is actually chambered in 5.56 and not 223.
If I ever buy 223, it is 100% specifically designated for like short range training ammo, just because it was cheaper at the time.
Yeah, and
anything I consider operational is always 5.56.
Yeah, and it's not because like, well, 5.56 or 223 is better. It's because I can fire 223 and 5.56 chambering.
Mm-hmm.
So versus if I got a 223 chambering, I can't fire 5.56.
Yeah, it would mess up your barrel over time.
Yeah, so having that 5.56 chambering allows me essentially two different types of rounds.
What is your opinion on the automatic rifleman and the Minuteman or the civilian force or anything like that? That seems to be a little controversial right now. I am a big proponent of IAR and RPK styles. Go ahead.
I talked to Blake Flannery about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was me that got it going. I just know that I get a lot of comments and tags and stuff about it because of a few posts I have made about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
go ahead.
But I'm a believer in it. Now the thing is, like, I'm not telling people to just use an AR or a semi-auto for your automatic rifleman. No, that's not what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, until we can get machine guns, I believe having somebody with a weapon system that can handle high amounts of ammunition, high amounts of round fire, to be someone that designates as your suppressing fire within the team.
And I think it's important that we realize the limits and the capabilities of those IR RPK style rifles, those LSWs, because a lot of people are like, if we get an RPK and have an automatic rifleman, we've got a machine gun. Well, no, that is not at all true, not in the slightest.
Yeah,
I think for me, I started considering the automatic rifleman role more when Brent 0331 started talking about the RPK style clones that they had for One Shepherd. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that RPK.
I don't like that one specifically, but the thought of an automatic rifleman for me came from that series of posts.
Yeah, so it's a hot topic, because I know when I made the post, people were like, "Oh, binary triggers or FRT triggers, stuff like that." And I was like, "No, in my opinion, those are stupid." A good example was executive outcomes or admin results. Administrative results.
Administrative results has his name.
The talking balaclava.
The talking balaclava.
So, he had a video that he had a M27, he had a HK MR556, and he has an FRT trigger in there. And if someone that's actually fired a machine gun trained wise and knows how to actually control it, you can hear how he's struggling to actually control that weapon. You can hear it. He's shooting really fast. He dumps a lot of ammo really quickly, but if you actually pay attention and watch, you can actually see and hear where there's a pause because he like messed up his trigger squeeze. And that's important because you can't just throw somebody on there like, here, you're the automatic rifleman now, and like expect them to perform the way you would want them to, because they're just going to be mag dumping. They don't understand rates of fire. They don't understand conservation of fires. They don't understand, what actually goes into actually like machine gunnery in a sense.
And I think that's, sorry, go ahead.
Like there is definitely an art to being machine gunning.
100%. And I think that's definitely why it's important to highlight the limits and the capabilities of that role, of that weapon platform. But I also think it serves as long as you're knowledgeable or someone that is knowledgeable that's teaching it. I think it's important to get that training now, even on, that LSW style weapon, because it can carry over to when machine guns are implemented at a later point in time. I would rather take somebody that's been running, a 20-inch AR with a force reset trigger on a bipod, that's been training on that and has been studying, 0331 books or all that kind of stuff, and then I give them a belt fed versus just, hey, you're a big strong kid, here's the 240 we stole off this Humvee.
Yeah, and obviously, like, if you're training to control that weapon, like with the FRT, absolutely. I'm like, I still think it's stupid, but obviously, if you're training, then obviously you can definitely be effective. I talked to Reaper about this, was like, how long does it take to train somebody to know how to shoot like effectively? Like if you grab somebody brand new, never shot a gun before, how long would it take you to train them to be able to fire a target like 300 to 500 meters away with combat effective accuracy?
It would take quite some time because there's so much that goes into it outside of the range.
Right, and we're talking about normal people, so like probably only on weekends, right? Maybe, I don't know, in a perfect world, maybe every weekend, maybe it's every other weekend, I don't know. Like, again, that's another factor. It's like, okay, are they actually dry firing at home? Are they studying, wind holds and, whole value, half value, stuff like that? Are they learning, let's say they're using ACOG, are they understanding how to use that ACOG and, stuff like that? So like, how long will it take to get them to be able to have combat accuracy on that target? Okay, now how long is it going to take for you to take that guy that just learned how to shoot, to teach him how to shoot a machine gun or control a machine gun?
And I think a big thing with that is you talk about training in the long-term scale of actually training someone to a specific standard, is that even if you're a veteran and you're training civilians, you may not have all of the knowledge to bring someone to a capability that you want them to be at.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I am not an infantryman by traits. I worked with the infantry a lot prior to doing embassy security, and then now I study a lot of, conventional and small unit tactic books, but I am not an experienced, line company guy. So there's only so much I can teach to somebody that is what I would consider credible information. And that goes for anything. If you don't have a background in Intel, you can only teach so much about Intel before you're kind of just talking out of your ass, or you're just repeating, book gibberish.
Yeah.
I think that kind of just goes into being, kind of being humble in the training aspect of things.
Yeah. I forgot I was going to go with that again. I'm sorry.
You're good. Let's see. So we talked about kind of some weapon systems. We talked about ambushes a little bit. What about we kind of hit on this earlier, but I kind of want to dive into a little bit more. Um, Establishing logistics for the small units or the guerrilla style force, and I don't necessarily mean logistics like your own personal logistics, like your stockpiles. I mean like revolving logistics or like support elements in a sense.
Okay.
If that kind of makes sense.
So you mean like dedicated support personnel?
Dedicated support personnel or establishing community members that are friendly with your cause. If it's not a whole thing where it's like this region is all on my side. Like if your region is split or your region is dominated by an outside force that's larger than yours, whatever that may be, kind of establishing some logistics to keep your small unit operations moving.
Yeah. I saw you did a post about it too, and I did one. It was like a civilian version of the headquarters platoon.
Mm-hmm.
So in that I had two medics. It was two medics, two logistics, a commo guy, and two maintenance guys. So that was essentially 8. On the post, I said like 1 to 2 per, but
Something happened to your audio. I can hear you, but it's really blurry.
can you hear me now?
I can. It's just it sounds muffled.
Oh, that's not good. It's probably my phone.
Technical difficulties, folks. Do you have a headset on, or are you just talking into your phone?
I'm just talking to my phone.
Stand by, folks. We're gonna pause here for a sec. All right, sorry about that, guys. Didn't want the audio to go untreated and just not be good for you guys. All right, Nick, you were talking about your post and the kind of headquarter style elements that you had dedicated. If you want to go ahead and keep expanding on that.
Yeah, so it was 2 medics, 2 logistics, 2 commos, and 2 maintenance guys.
Let's see. I think on mine I had for the overall thing. It wasn't necessarily a dedicated headquarters unit, but just general consideration for billets. I had training officer, medics, logistics officers, intel officers, then comm officers.
Yeah, and I based that off of pretty much the way we do our headquarters platoons here in the Army, at least for mine was. So, and then the only thing that was out there was like, the XO and company commander was just strictly like the actual support in that platoon.
Yeah.
So you're going to have your logistics people, and like their sole purpose is coordinating everything logistics. So if your team platoons whatever they need, they report it up, they get them, they put, they resource them, get them, bring them back to you, and distribute. Your medics, so you're going to have your platoon medics, and then you're going to have your headquarters medics. And basically what they're going to serve as, when you got your casualties, you hand them off to your headquarters personnel, so that way your platoon medic can go back to your platoon and get in the fight and be ready for future casualties. Your commo guy, pretty self-explanatory. They're in charge of keeping the communications equipment up and running for the headquarters, but as well for the platoon. So if frequencies change, they make sure like everybody's on the right freak. If you're running, some kind of encrypted type of radios, making sure that everyone has the right fill for that. They could also be potentially monitoring radios, like say you're working with another force or a bigger force, or monitoring to maybe even enemy forces. That'd be more electronic warfare, but
maybe if they had the skill and capabilities to do it, they could do that as well. And then you have your maintenance guys, which they're in charge of keeping vehicles running, fixing them, your generators, and then the big one would be recovering. So if you're using up vehicles in operations, truck gets hit, it's no longer good. Everyone grabs their gear, bump plans, spread loads to other vehicles. They come, get that vehicle out of there and back to wherever. So if it's just a guerrilla force, it's probably maybe it might stay there, or maybe they're gonna dump it somewhere else so they their enemy can't see it and get a BDA off of that.
And as like for the civilian force, the Minuteman style force, if you're not large scale, community, or regional, like let's say you're a squad sized element. You got 3 fire teams of 4 and then a squad leader, the good old bro vet. You can split up different tasks or responsibilities that rotate on a normal basis to your fire teams. Like let's say for fire team 1, their responsibility is comms, intel, things like that nature. Technology, like the drones and whatnot your group may have, they focus on those types of things. And then your second fire team is heavy on assisting in operational planning and security plans and all that kind of stuff. And then your third fire team focuses on logistics and maintenance, because they have 2 guys in that fire team that happen to be welders, and the other guy was a factory manager. You kind of put people into positions that they are knowledgeable in, and then you create a sense of self-sustainment even amongst that small force.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like you can't just have just a bunch of knuckle draggers and like all they know is shooting, and you're gonna need guys that have other skills.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna need it.
And as a leader, you should identify those things earlier rather than later.
Yeah. I'm sure you saw in the Marines too, like every platoon had somebody that had some weird little skill that they know or do. Like everybody has like a mechanic. Mm-hmm. Everybody has musician. Everybody has like somebody that knows computers really well, stuff like that. So like finding people with skills like that is going to be crucial, and then bringing them in, and then like, okay, your job for us outside of fighting is this, and then when we go out, you're in this team and this is what you do, but when we're back here, this is what you do.
For sure. And as your group grows, as something big happens nationally and the community organizes in a sense and balkanizes, or the Chinese invade and your community creates a plan, whatever it is, as you start to get bigger, you can start to look at that more big picture, like Nick was talking about, with like different large unit roles. Like this is the maintenance guys, this is the comm guys. It doesn't have to be like individual people in all these fire teams. Like it can be a dedicated element.
Yeah, and
that's something. Go ahead.
Like a great example, honestly, is looking at the Taliban and insurgents in Iraq. Mm-hmm. Like they had all that. If you want to look at modern stuff, look at them. They had the IEDs chaining, right? So you had the actual bomb maker. Well, then you had somebody that would plan where the bomb was going to go. And then you have like 2 to 3, 4 guys that would actually take turns digging the thing to put it in there. So there was like so many people working that just IEDs.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the whole roundabout of this episode, is there's so much to learn from conventional forces that you can apply to your small units. The Taliban being a perfect example. They had a planning system. They had positions. They had billet breakdowns. Yeah, they're a bunch of terrorists in pajamas, but
they're a lot smarter than people realize.
Yeah, they're pretty smart. I mean, their entire life is war. That's what people don't realize, is that entire area of the world, those people literally know nothing but war, because there's always a war.
Yeah, and I talked to Redbeard again about that. Was um, from at least when I was briefed, it was essentially they ran their terrorist organization like a business. So the business side, they would be doing everything logistics wise. So moving money, getting money, buying whatever supplies, and bombing material and guns, whatever propaganda and flights, whatever. They handle all that. The other side, that was like the fighters and stuff that we dealt with. And so like even then it was still organized of like who was doing what to keep it going.
ISIS was very well established in that in like 2014, 2015, 2016 before they kind of got scattered. Was they established really government logistics and services aside from their actual like direct action element forces. Like when they would take over a city or a region, they would reestablish
Every
everything. The courts, the markets, the banks, like they did everything.
And that's another point too, is like that is in a way leadership. I did this for a class once for a bunch of sergeants, and on the board, on the first slide of the PowerPoint, I had pictures of Hitler, I had pictures of Oprah Winfrey, I had Einstein, I had Obama, I had Pol Pot. I had like a mix of like well-known people and like dictators and evil people, like all that, right? And I was like, these are all leaders. Like whether you like it or not, they're leaders. Hitler is probably one of the better examples to use, is because like, do you know how hard it actually is to try to convince an entire country that one particular group of people is the reason for your problems? Like actually convince them and to agree and side with you, and then do horrible things and build it to where they either agree with it or they're afraid to say anything about it. That's not easy to do.
If both of you look at the Nazis in Germany in the 1930s and 1940s, then you look at even like Karl Marx and communism in Russia. Both Karl Marx and Hitler, horrible people that did horrible things. Hey, we don't, that doesn't even need to be a discussion.
No.
But you're right. They were not only leaders, but just they were extremely intelligent and they were dedicated, and they spent so much time and resources building what they envisioned.
Yeah, and that's just like, I guess that goes back to recruitment. It's like, what's in it for them?
And they knew how to rally people to the cause.
Yes.
Specifically Hitler. Like, even today, you can look back at these massive marches and speeches done by Hitler and the Nazi Party, specifically after they finally gained full control, and just the emotion and the energy in these marches and these rallies were, you don't see things like that.
No.
Like it was truly, and I don't mean this in a positive manner, it was truly amazing what they were able to do.
Yeah, and it's like, and somebody, I guess, listening is like, well, how does that apply to me, just, a regular dude or in the militia or whatever like that? It's like, well, as a leader, you basically have to get people to trust you with their lives to go rush a machine gun bunker. Like, that was, essentially what I did as a leader in the Marine Corps. It's like, hey, when I say get up and move, we're going into this building, you better get up and move. And it's not like, okay, yeah, I'm okay, let's go. It's like the look on their faces is like, yeah, let's fucking go. They're all about it. That's what you're trying to get, is like, they're all about it. Like, they know it's going to be dangerous, but they're about it.
And an even bigger picture to that is, how do you get your community or your county to rally behind you? How do you convince the city council members and the fire chief and the school board and like all these other people to be like, yes, this is an individual that we as a community want to stand by because he has good faith and principle, and he actually cares about the outcome of this community. That is questionably even more important.
Yes.
And that is, unfortunately, probably a reality that a lot of people will face. You may know you're going to be one of those individuals right now. You may not know you're going to be one of those individuals. But nothing is going to get done in whatever fantasy that you may paint in your mind. Nothing is going to get done if you do not win over the hearts and minds of the very people that you literally live next to.
Yes.
Otherwise, it is a lost cause. People always like to say it's not a lost cause. If you can't even win over your exact next door neighbor, or people in your own community that you've known all your life, then it kind of is a lost cause.
Mm-hmm.
I digress, though. I guess kind of on that, we didn't really have this on the list, but we can kind of talk about that. What are obviously you're in the military, so you haven't done this civilian side thing that kind of I and a lot of other guys do. But in your mind, because I'm sure you've thought about it, what are some things guys can do to win positive affirmation and trust from the community members? Because there is a balance, and I talk about it with my guys a lot, is that you don't want to be known, but at the same time, you don't necessarily always want to be just complete strangers. I don't know if that makes much sense, or if there's anything you can go off of from that.
You mean like connecting?
Connecting, or I would even kind of like what Op 4 was talking about the other day, is like the propaganda aspect of that. Like let's say right now you have a squad size element of dudes between the county you live in and the county next to you.
Okay.
What do you do now to put yourself in a positive light for, a year and a half from now when there's a complete breakdown, and your guys are the group that stands up to help, lead the community out of possible danger, or lead them to the light, whatever that may be. How do you establish for people to trust you, or can you not even do that right now? Just generally, what's your thoughts on that? It's a hard one to think about.
Okay. Do you remember the hurricanes back in 2017 that hit Houston?
I do.
Okay, so I was in Fort Polk, so I got like the back end of it. It was just tropical storms when it hit us, but everyone remembers the Cajun Navy.
Yep.
So there's a good example right there. Like, I'm pretty sure, if I remember, I think the Cajun Navy was like they were considered like a militia group. I can't remember.
So the Cajun Navy was around prior to that, and it kind of formed after Katrina, which was basically a whole, southern side of the United States volunteer group in a sense. I do believe they have some sort of large scale command element, but it's not necessarily organized. But I'll let you keep going on what you're talking about.
I can't remember, but I think it was just a volunteer group, but basically something like that. It was like, this group just went on their own and offered what help they could give. And at that time, it was their boats that were designed for shallow water fishing. And they took them into the flooded neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. I talked to Hidden Wanderer about that, actually. Hidden Wanderer, I think, or Confucius Origins. I talked to one of them about it, but it was like, he asked me, like, what did I think we needed to do to get us, like, more out there and perceived differently? And it was like, I told him that I think we need somebody on the political side, like, highlighting what we do for the good.
And the problem with that is that the politics are so broken at this point as to where you can't go to that game and not play the game.
Well, it's not about the game I'm talking about. It's just about getting the attention.
Are you talking about like an individual to go to the politicians, or an individual becoming the politicians?
Maybe a politician that can be shed light on, someone that like, because there's a lot of like outspoken Second Amendment supporting politicians.
Old Thomas Massey, baby.
So, and like, there's even, I can't remember. I think it's the one I'm talking about, where he even said like, when we say stack up, like we mean stack up.
Oh, I remember what you're talking about. I can't remember who it was, but I remember what you were talking about.
Yeah, he said that in the chambers. Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
So
you're talking about an individual within politics at some level that's like, these guys aren't bad people.
Like showing the good.
Yeah. Okay,
because
I know what you're talking about.
Because they do that all the time with groups. They always do that. And it's like, we don't need all of Congress and the Senate. We don't need that.
Yeah.
What we need is being highlighted what good we do. Mm-hmm. That's what we need. Because we already know not everyone's going to be for us. We already know that.
Yeah.
And we're not worried about the ones that will never be for us. It's the ones on the fence that aren't sure, and then they see more good being done than what they're being told of what we do.
And, thinking back to the smaller scale picture, you're talking about volunteering for, like, the floods and whatnot. Like, natural disaster relief type things is really big for your local crews. I'm not saying you should travel necessarily 6 or 7 hours away to natural disasters, to an area that you're not even familiar with. But, like, if, 2 or 3 counties away from you gets flooded, like, going and helping them and establishing that type of repertoire and reputation will benefit you a lot in the long run. You shouldn't do it just to make yourself known, but out of the kindness of your heart as well, because that is what you're supposed to do as good community members.
Yeah.
Now, the downside to that is that normally, depending on the scale of the situation, government steps in and starts kicking you out. I believe the Appalachian Rangers, if you're familiar with their page, had that problem in the floods down in Kentucky. Because they operate out of like the north side of Tennessee, south side of Kentucky, and they went to those floods and originally were helping and whatnot, but eventually there's so much government resources that show up, they want everybody else to leave.
Yeah.
And that's a reality for a lot of natural disaster type stuff, is eventually they're just like, get out of my way.
Yes.
And that's just a reality you kind of got to face.
And I would say that's okay, because
that's what they're there for. That's what they're supposed to be there for.
Yeah, they're supposed to be there for. But people are going to see like, well, these people here were helping before you, so why did it take you so long to get to me?
I think the Appalachian Rangers did talk about that. They were like, we were on ground, with food and helping hands before all these state resources started showing up.
Yeah, and that's something like, I guess, more on the propaganda side, like, look, we responded this way faster, and we're not government organized. Mm-hmm. We're people like you who came together and organized faster than the government can.
Now, with all that being said, whether it's natural disasters, riots, whatever it may be, you have to remember your own limits and capabilities once again, because understanding your limits and capabilities is massive.
Mm-hmm.
If it's, like we said, the county over from you, you probably have a general idea of that area study and, all of that goes into that. But if it's like, oh, this is on the other side of the state 4 hours away, we're going to go and try and help. Well, do you have any contacts down there? Do you have an area study of that area? Do you have logistics to support you once you get there? So there are limits and capabilities to you as a civilian force that you need to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think that's a good way to get into it. Another big thing with that is going to different types of events and being open. A lot of people are so scared of the idea of feds and infiltrators and all that kind of stuff that they just refuse to talk about anything, any portion of the time. There's a time and place, but if a company is holding an open range day and you and 2 other buddies as representatives from the group go, and you just meet other guys that may be near your area, and you just kind of spitball ideas and just talk about some general topics, that's not a bad thing. You're not doing anything wrong.
No.
You should be cognizant of everything that you say, and be cognizant of what's going on, but you can't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Yeah, and I know it can be hard because I just had this experience with my own parents. They live in California, and I live literally on the completely other side of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hey, when I retire, I'm not moving back to California. I'm your only son. When my grandmother is gonna die soon, she's old.
Mm-hmm.
Your mother, my dad, your mom just recently passed away. What are you staying there for? Who's going to take care of you? And it's like, basically, I'm like trying to lead them to like, hey, what is your plan for when you get older to take care of yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and like that's asking them like, hey, come home to me where I'm going to be living. And you're asking them to like drop everything and start a new life. Like, and I know it's kind of like it's different, but it's like it's in a sense it's the same because it's like, hey, join our group. This is what we're about. It's like, hey, I'm trying to get my parents to like do something for the better of them so I can take care of them.
Mm.
It's like it like trying to bring people in. I guess like it can be challenging.
Yeah, and some people aren't as social as others. I'm an extremely social individual, so I can talk to anyone about really anything. But then there are other people in my group that aren't as good at recruiting because they don't, not that they aren't necessarily social, but they don't know how to approach things in a more professional yet open manner. So there are going to be individuals that are better at recruiting and propaganda than you are. I mean, you should definitely lean on those individuals. But it's all a big learning experience as far as that goes.
Yeah.
Kind of as we start to wrap this up, when we're still on the topic of civilians, what are, now that we've talked about a bunch of different ways that civilians could be utilized in an organized manner, both conflict and non-conflict related, what are some big areas of focus we should focus on training? Outside of like
shooting,
outside of shooting and stuff like that, like the cool guy stuff.
Planning, man.
Planning's huge.
I'm really big on planning. Like, planning is so much a skill, just like anything else is.
Everybody in your group should know how to write a SMEAC.
Not even that. It's just like just thinking about what you're trying to do and what is your plan to do it. It doesn't have to be like a full 5-paragraph order, but like I was saying this on a live one. It's just like, okay, if you're gonna go to Costco, and Costco is 15 minutes away from your house, you already know your route you're gonna get there, right? You already know where you're probably gonna park because it's this time of day on this day of the week. You already know what you're going to go there for, so you already know what aisles you're going to come in, and you already know what to expect of how long you're waiting in line, right? Now, if there's, I don't know, if I'm taking the freeway to get there, and there's a giant traffic jam, do I know alternate routes to get around to that Costco? So I can get there faster and not wasting time in traffic. When I get to that Costco, do I know where the exits are in case something happens? Do I pay attention to where I'm at the time in the store? So that way it's like if something happens, I know I'm this far away from this exit or I'm this far away from that exit. Like little practicing planning like that.
I think you just described a 5-paragraph order.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't want to like people. I say like not exactly because I don't want people to like get what's the word? I guess paranoid or intimidated.
Yeah, intimidated. Yeah, it's probably a good point.
I don't want people getting intimidated by the 5-paragraph order.
Yeah,
and like I say it that way. I did because it gets people to realize like, oh, yeah, I do that already. You know, like, oh, okay. And it's like you just highlight things that they already do, and they don't realize like, yeah, you plan out methodically everything you're going to do. You know, that's your mission. And then they just apply it to, you know, an actual operational mission, I guess.
What I guess what type of skills do you think are of high importance that guys should either do their own research on or find somebody to teach them on?
Ooh, man, I don't know, because I don't know what civilians are lacking.
I think comms is a big one.
Comms.
I've talked a bunch with comms and logistics recently, and the amount of comms information he's been sharing with me, like, I would have never been able to find out the length of information in which he shared with me if somebody did not sit me down and show me all of the software, all of the, you know, knowledge, the equipment, the resources. Like, comms is a really big one that I think civilians overlook because we're so stuck in Baofeng mode. But like, if you look at like HF, if you look at encrypted comms and you start looking at digital, like, you start looking at all these elements that go into comms, and it's a really complex field. And you know, comms makes an operation.
Yes.
But if you're rocking $30 Baofangs for an entire, you know, war, that war may be very short for you.
Yeah. I need to get rid of my Baofangs.
We're all guilty of it. Everybody goes to the Baofeng stage.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like the Baofeng is the S&P Sport AR-15. Like everybody has that stage. It's that learning curve.
Yeah.
Unless, you know, the FBI gives you a Daniel Defense rifle. I think another big one for people that civilians should hit on more is like area studies, and then also like true reconnaissance. I feel like that's a very under talked about topic. You know, can you put on civilian attire and go to town and collect all of the information without becoming detected to eventually plan the operation that you want to conduct?
So unconventional reconnaissance.
Unconventional reconnaissance. Or if you were thinking more big picture, more conventional, did you do the area study of your area to implement, you know, a large organized force, even if it's a, you know, a volunteer group, like just an absolute crap ton of Minutemen with little training? Do you have an area study in mind of how to, you know, basically write and implement different defensive area plans and things like that?
Yeah. Reconnaissance is a whole another world too. Like, because you got LAR, Cav Scout, reconnaissance, which what I do. Then you got Marine Recon. Then you got Special Recon in the soft community. And each of those, you know, it's its own unique purpose. Because like when everyone thinks reconnaissance, that's what they think of right away, is like Marine Recon and like special SR, you know, SR reconnaissance and like, you know, SEALs and SF and stuff like that. They don't think about like the LAR, Marine LAR and Cav Scouts of like reconnaissance. It's like, yeah, it's not as sexy as like them, you know, running around with panos and Mark 18s and stuff and beards, but like what we do is, you know, we fight for information, and that is just as important as the stuff they are doing. So I mean,
and there's so many different levels in that,
yes,
you know, recon itself.
You got like drone operators, you know, and they're doing their area reconnaissance, and you got Apache pilots doing reconnaissance, you know. So it's just like there's so many like types of reconnaissance. It's like, it's not just, walking around in the woods with a backpack on, and
Yeah.
it's so much more.
And being able to record and report that information is huge, even in a standardized fashion. How are you presenting that information to the rest of your forces? After you've conducted said recon, let's say you and two buddies got in a Subaru and did XYZ routes on this exact location to figure out its specific features. Okay, how are you collecting that information? Did you take pictures? Well, what did you take pictures of? Did you just take pictures of a wall? Or did you take pictures because the wall has a defensive position or a tower on it or something like that? There has to be a lot of why behind all of those types of things.
Yeah, and I mean, like you just mentioned route reconnaissance, and it's like, that's a whole different thing too right there, because for me, like, what I do, it's going a route recon is not just driving and like, can we drive on this thing and good? Like, no, it's, hey, there's an obstacle here, crap, there's probably somebody watching it, and next thing you know, we're getting lit up and we're fighting. And then after we eliminate the enemy, all right, now we need to get engineers out here to clear this obstacle. Then once that's done, guess what? Continue the mission. Like,
and then even more difficultly is PIR, personal identification reconnaissance, tracking a single individual or a single group of individuals, which that's an even deeper field with a whole lot more tasks within it. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. I think the Army calls it something different, and I may be even using the wrong acronym for it.
PIR means something different to me. So, because PIR for us is a priority information requirements. So,
maybe I'm using the wrong acronym. I'm trying to remember. We talked about it a lot with like embassy security, because when we would like record specific individuals that seem to be like observing the embassy and whatnot.
Yeah.
And we pass on that information to either like, our intel resources or like other local intel resources that we work with. I'm trying to remember the acronym for that. It was something like that. And in general terms, tracking a specific individual or collecting information on a specific individual for whatever purpose at hand it may be. Let's say, I guess a good way for this to be implemented or be applicable, I should say, is, let's say a left-wing militia group happens to take over your area because you live in a suburban style town outside of a large city, and where you happen to live, it just so happens to be extremely, let's say, just say socialist. So a socialist armed wing has arose in your area, and local forces, for whatever reason, have not been able to quell that threat. Well, you, as a much smaller force, will say, can you identify key leadership positions in that? Because you're not necessarily fighting a conventional force in all matching camis. It's a completely different beast. It just goes for different government officials. If you look at the Taliban, the Taliban always targeted specific government officials in the Afghan government, and so on and so forth. So that's just another idea or capability as far as just like the reconnaissance or intel portion goes.
Yep.
I think I'm just kind of rambling at this point on that topic.
No, I mean, you just brought up like a memory when you said that. I was like, yeah. So, but we're going down a rabbit hole because like there's so much into reconnaissance that people don't realize. Like, it's not just beards and hiking boots and backpacks.
It is cool to have beards and hiking boots and backpacks, though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just.
I wish I still had my beard. When I got out of the Marine Corps and I grew my beard, I was in love, and then I went to the Fire Academy, and I have shaved every day since. I never really got to fully embrace the bro vet beard. Well, I think this is kind of a good point for us to kind of start wrapping up. Everything else, I think, kind of leads down rabbit holes, which we don't want to overwhelm information
Yeah.
in a sense. Is there any other key areas that you kind of wanted to hit on as far as like conventional takeaways um, for civilians to either study or look into or anything like that?
Probably leadership positions.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That was something I think on our notes we never really hit on.
So, probably the misconception of a leader in like a combat role. Because everyone always, I guess, the movies portray, or even like video games portray, like the leaders, like, running, charging, follow me, this and that. I was like, no, not necessarily. That's why there's like the fighter leader concept, but it's not what you think. Like as a leader in a combat role is more of a mentor and somebody that's what's the word? Something to inspire you, and also a subject matter expert.
Subject matter expert is a big thing because like if you're a squad leader per se, your fire teams and your fire team leaders are your responsibility. It's your job to mentor them and continue to develop them across multiple fronts of knowledge, and they look to you as that resource of knowledge and experience.
Yeah, because you can have all the knowledge, but if you're not able to inspire them and mentor them to do it, that knowledge is going to be pretty useless. A good example would be like old school breaching. Get Private Schmuckatelli, hey man, grab your ISO mat, and you're gonna jump on the C wire, and we're gonna run on your back and get over the.
I've never personally experienced that, but
I have.
When I heard about that, I was like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
It's an actual thing, but yeah.
I know it's an actual thing.
But it works. But like,
it does work.
But like, do you like getting that guy to like trust you to do that is like, yeah, man, we're serious. This is how we do it. But like, you're gonna be the guy. Like, don't worry, we're gonna get you. We're coming. We're not leaving you.
We'll come back. Just stay there for a minute.
And yeah, but it's like, yeah, but that's what I mean. It's like you gotta get that trust. If that's the only way to get it done, and it's gonna suck, but they gotta trust you.
I talked about this big one day after a PT session with my guys, is that as a leader, regardless of whatever element you find yourself in, whether you're a company size element, your squad size element, whatever it is, as the leader, those under you, that is your responsibility. I don't mean that in a negative way, I mean that in a positive way. Like, they are yours to care for, to look after, to train, to lead. Like, it is a privilege to be in a leadership position. It is, it's something that should be earned, and it's something that should be, in a non-cheesy way, kind of like glorified. It's like, yes, we look up to that guy. That guy is my leader.
Yeah. But I think, too, is also being a good subordinate.
Absolutely.
That doesn't get talked about much, I think.
It's just like the old saying goes, you have to learn to follow before you can lead.
Yes. But also, too, is so I would tell my guys, like, I'll be nice to have around. Like, you guys don't need me. Mm-hmm. I'm just nice to have around. I handle your paperwork. I get the stuff you need, like, you tell me your problems. I go to platoon sergeant and get it and all this kind of stuff. Like, I'm nice to have. Because at the end of the day, it's you guys that are doing all the work. It's nice to have me around, so that way you have one less thing to worry about while you're doing whatever task you got at hand. Like, I'm not needed, because really, like, the platoon sergeant can just grab a whole bunch of privates and, like, let's go, and until it's done. But, just full force of a bunch of privates running around.
Mm-hmm. And you never, especially on the civilian side, you never know when that key leadership position, that guy that brought the group together may not be there anymore. He may need to move because it's better for his family and his life. I could die in a structure fire my next shift, and are my guys able to continue to do all the things I've been trying to push them to do? Schmuckatelli could help and move his family 3 states away, and now he's no longer in that position to lead that group. Or maybe you have to step away because family priorities. Yeah, you're still in the area, but you can't put the time and effort into your group anymore. So yeah, it's like you said, it's nice to have those guys around, but you should want to develop your guys to not need you.
Yeah. I've done that maybe, let me see, one time, like one really good team. And like, let me see, we were doing like a platoon team leader competition. And I had to go to the aid station that day of the actual competition. Mm-hmm. My automatic rifleman took over the team. He's just a lance corporal. And keep in mind, this guy was like not the highest thought of lance corporal in the platoon. Mm-hmm. He had some issues before, but he turned around and changed and all that. But people still kind of like, that's him, whatever, blah, blah, blah. This guy ends up like putting 2 corporals, what's the word I'm looking for? Like tying with them essentially, like 2 corporals who are supposed to be like good team leaders, and like makes them like almost beats them. And it's like, that's awesome. Like, you did all that without me there. So.
Well, I think we're probably at a pretty good stopping point. We're coming up on 2 hours here.
Yeah.
This was definitely good. I'm glad to have gotten another military guy in here to kind of talk about some conventional stuff, specifically in this matter, because I can't remember who I was trying to talk to about this last. I think it was comms and logistics. This podcast, I'm trying to make it, in a sense, like a library of information, and I'm trying to bring in so many different like subjects and so many different guests to cover different things that I want people to be able to reference this as information. Like, I want to learn about, I'm just an average Joe Schmo civilian. Here's an episode on concealed carry. I am that Minuteman civilian. Here's a episode on conventional forces and takeaways. I want to know comms. Here's an episode like that. So I'm trying to make this a library of information for people to be able to reference. So I was definitely glad to get you on here and kind of talk more big picture military topics with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure. Normally I do some shout outs. So is there any shout outs you like to give?
No, none that I could think of.
Damn, he said screw the homies, guys.
Yeah, check out the Map Daddy, Wandering Hoosier.
I love it. Oh, I was the first one to make that comment about Map Daddy like a week or 2 ago.
Oh, I'm gonna make it a thing.
Oh, I'm gonna push it. I'm gonna push it so hard.
Yeah, I'm gonna make it a thing. He is the Map Daddy.
He is Map Daddy now, and he doesn't like it. And that's what makes me love it even more.
Keep on doing it.
Shout out to Map Daddy.
Yep. This one's for you, Map Daddy.
Anything else?
No, that's it. Again, appreciate you having me. I was pretty surprised to be invited because I've never been asked to for an interview of anything. So I was like, oh, cool.
Hey, you put out good information. I like your style of information presentation, and I think that's one big thing I like about this whole transition of the community is seeing all the different ways guys like to present information. So keep doing the things that you do. I know it's definitely a ton of good information, and people really like your channel. So keep that stuff coming.
Yeah, Brad. Thank you. Appreciate it.
As always, guys, shout out to my local crew for doing everything you guys do. You guys go balls to the wall and you know, train harder than a lot of Marines I ever served with. So you guys rock. And then shout out to my girlfriend for being not only supportive of everything I do here at ECT, but also quiet during this podcast. Big thank you to you. Well, Nick, appreciate you coming on, buddy. I hope to, you know, do some collab work and talk to you more in the future.
Yeah, man. I mean, message me anytime, man.
For sure. All right, guys, that is the end of episode 8 of the Everyday Citizens Tactical Podcast, Conventional Forces and Civilian Takeaways. As always, train hard, train often.
Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours. Tell me turn it down